Climate change negotiations growing more tense in Copenhagen, as we've been talking about, as the U.S. and China remain at odds. No matter the outcome, investors are looking for alternative energy plays. And Gordon Johnson is a solar stock analyst with Hapoalim Securities. He joins us now to talk about the industry. And I have to at least touch on Copenhagen first, you know, as they're wrangling over there. Do you think anything substantive is going to come out of this?
I don't think so, Julian. Thanks for having me on the show. I don't think so, because what hasn't happened is in the two key countries that are emitting the most CO2 gases, i.e. the U.S. and China, there's been nothing specifically announced. There's been verbiage and targets set, but there's been nothing specific announced. So I think until either we pass a climate bill or China enacts something concrete, I think that we're going to have a hard time reaching a final agreement on a CO2 emission. And I also think the whole climategate issue is kind of a dark cloud over the heads of a lot of politicians. I think it's going to take a little longer. I think it'll slip into 2010 for a final agreement.
Let's also just touch on cap and trade, because that's obviously something else that's coming up. Could that potentially be a catalyst?
It could definitely be a catalyst for the stocks, but I think it's going to be a very tough time getting through the Senate. Clearly, the Waxman-Markey bill has been approved in the House. The Senate is now debating over what's going to happen with that bill. I think that it very narrowly passed the House. So I think in the Senate, there's going to be a very tough time. And I think what investors have to keep in mind is that we're having midterm elections here in the U.S. In the middle of 2010. So if the Republicans take a stronger position in Congress, I think it'll be very tough moving forward to get incremental climate bill legislation passed.
So politics aside, whether it's global politics or politics in Washington, let's get down to the nitty-gritty here. You've been bearish on this group for quite some time, solar stocks, that is. And it's sort of an outlook that doesn't even really take the politics into account. It's more about supply and demand. So lay it out for me here.
Very simply, Julie, we've done the extensive analysis that I don't think a lot of, or some of the analysts out there have done. And if you look at the amount of supply coming online, not only from the solar module manufacturers, but also from the upstream polysilicon manufacturers, it's going to significantly exceed demand. And these are commodity products. Polysilicon is a commodity product. It's effectively sand that it's a very chemical intense process that makes poly, but it's effectively sand. And then a solar module, very low intensive R&D business. It's a commodity. So when a commodity business is oversupplied, laws of economics tell you price equals marginal costs. We're nowhere near marginal costs. I think as those prices come down, as these guys irrationally ramp capacity, I think it's going to create quite a negative situation. And I think it's going to happen. We're already seeing the effects of it now, but I think it's going to happen to a large extent next year.
But why isn't demand increasing? I mean, you would think it would be, not just these potential political catalysts that are coming up. More people are perceived, at least, to be shifting to alternative energy. But in the years to come, I mean, this is something that at least is gaining traction sort of socially in the consciousness. Is it just that concretely people are not switching over to solar power? I
think that's a great point. And the reason why I think solar power demand is going to lag some of the other alternative energies is because solar power is by far, solar PV is by far the most expensive of the alternatives. I think that there's going to be a huge boost in alternative energies used, but I don't necessarily think that it's going to be money targeted to solar power. There's a lot of analysts who cover solar power stocks. There's a lot of publicly traded solar power stocks. But when you look at the more cheaper forms of alternative energy, wind, biomass, geothermal, significantly cheaper than solar PV, even solar thermal, which no one knows about because there's only solar PV stocks that are public, solar PV is just way more expensive than everything else. Recently in California, there was a 55 megawatt solar project that was canceled. It was a first solar project that was canceled. And the reason is because it was too expensive. The transmission infrastructure to basically, you had to invest in to basically make this thing a reality was so expensive that the local residents in that LA County area decided that they didn't want this to happen. So I think that the issue is that it's not that I don't think alternative is going to be big. I just think solar is very expensive. And when you try to implement it, it becomes an issue. Okay,
just got to ask you, we don't have much time yet. The one stock that you have a buy on is Amtech, which is a tiny little company, less than $100 million market cap. How is this different from the other stocks that you cover?
Very simply, I think all of the solar module manufacturers are going to ramp capacity significantly this year and next, and they're going to buy equipment to increase their efficiency conversion. Amtech sells the equipment. to ramp that capacity and to increase that that efficiency conversion. They have a 50% market share in Asia, and specifically in China and Taiwan. They're going to benefit significantly.
But just very, very quickly here, 20 seconds, aren't these manufacturers at some point going to realize that they shouldn't be ramping capacity, if your thesis is correct?
They may realize that, but everybody needs to increase their efficiency. All the Chinese manufacturers need to increase efficiency, and Amtech has the right systems to do that.
Okay.
It's an undiscovered stock. Nobody covers it. I think there's significant upside.
All right, Gordon, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thanks a lot for coming in. Really appreciate it. Gordon Johnson of Hapoalim